Hi guys, I have been promising this episode of I Wrote a Novel Now What for, I don't know, a month? It's fine, everything is fine. But I'm here now and I actually have something really important to me that I want to say today about my own process writing my novel and, you know, confronting privilege and thinking about what I'm writing and the way that I'm writing it as a white person and a woman and a whole lot of other things. So just gonna back up for a second and tell you how we got to this point. I went through my novel, and again, if you haven't watched the first 2 episodes of this, what I'm saying is gonna make sense because it's a continuation. So if you haven't seen those, go back and watch those and then come back here. So I was writing out my timeline for my novel, and so I literally went through and on those index cards that I made, I wrote out in my notebook the, events for each day, trying to see what days I had packed with literally too much of anything to, actually be physically possible to do in a day, and where the things could be broken out and where the plot could be fleshed out. And so I did that, and as I was doing that, I also created a list of plot hole questions that I was asking myself that I had written kind of on the back of the cards but was thinking about. So like, why does my one character do this thing that made sense in the beginning of the novel to instigate the plot, but like the person that he is by the end of the book, when I've fleshed him out, like that initial thing doesn't make sense. So why does he do it? Can he still do that and it still makes sense of the character that he really is? Stuff like that. Asking questions about why the politics of the world that I've created are the way that they are. Because one of the basic plot points is that there's this treaty that this tiny island nation is trying to make with their much bigger, country over here. They once were in war with the other major power on the continent. That war has stopped, but now they're like fighting for land, resources, that kind of thing, and why this treaty is such an issue. And as I was writing all this stuff out, I realized that in writing my novel, I had lost one of the biggest social commentary pieces of the novel that I conceptualized when I started writing it, which is that this tiny island nation on which the book is set is like full of white people, and the treaty that they're trying to make with this big neighbor is ostensibly like, a Middle Eastern neighbor, in sense of a larger, I created the world, but that's like the closest real world comparison I can make for you. And so one of the part of the treaty is that the prince, the crown prince of this tiny island nation, has to marry a princess from this other nation. And so, of course, this like tiny island nation, part of them are kind of racist, and they're like, we don't want, this brown princess to come over and marry our white prince and create little tiny brown babies that will then be our king. And I knew that when I started writing the novel, but I let it fall away when I kept writing because I was so focused on like plot points and my main character and what was happening there. And so I created all of these plot holes by forgetting the race issue that I had put into my novel, by letting those issues slide under the table. And so when I was editing and trying to answer these questions that I had left for myself, this was why, because I hadn't addressed them. And then I also realized that if I wanted to, I could continue to not address them, that there were ways to fix the plot holes, that I could have just never mentioned any of this. And so I was just sitting there staring at my notebook, just like really interrogating it and looking at it and hating myself for having let that slide in the first place, but also like just, slapping my face and being like, there's no way that you don't include this. It has to be part of this book. You have to mention it. You have to attack this. You have to face it head on. But just like, my privilege as a person who has very, very white skin is, you know, traditionally heterosexual. And, you know, as a woman, I don't have to think about those things when I'm writing a plot. It's not something that was on my mind. It's not something that, you know, I was like, I can just focus on the action and the plot and the next thing and the next thing and the battle scene. But like, the novel is nothing without this other piece, even though I could technically, you know, choose to not have it there. But it's not a choice. It's not something that I can just say, oh, I don't need that, because it isn't really, even though it's a choice that sometimes authors do make. So I guess this is just kind of my general PSA to be like, if you're writing something and, you know, there are characters that aren't clicking the right way, or there's this weird plot dynamic, like, think about the characters that you've created and don't let your own unchecked privilege, you know, steamroll that. Because I did in the first draft. I've caught it now. I'm going to fix it. But like, you know, I could have not caught it. I could not fix it. And that would just be the worst author choice that I could make. So gonna fix that now. Gonna make my novel the real person novel with real questions being answered. And now all of a sudden my plot makes so much more sense. And is so much more aware. So that's where I'm at now. I'm using those questions. I'm doing some free writing with them, answering those questions, and then I'm going to go back and start answering them in the actual text of the novel. But first, going to do all the free writing with the questions. I'm about halfway done. I think I have like 15 questions where I was like, why is this like this when it shouldn't be? So yeah, that's where I'm at. Make sure, you know, you interrogate your novel. It's important. Don't not ask the important questions. I'm gonna keep writing. I'm gonna keep going. I'm gonna keep finding places where I let things slide, and I'm gonna fix it. And then I'm gonna have someone else read it and figure out all the places I didn't even realize I needed to fix because my privilege is that such. And I'm gonna fix those too. So it's gonna be great. It's gonna take a lot of work, but it's worth it. So gonna do that. Thanks, guys. Bye.